All right, we're officially recording. Well, hello, everybody. It's me, Tim Duffy, a founder of Electus Society. We're really excited for you who are watching this live in terms of this training, as well as those who are going to be watch the recording. This training is all about a leader's guide to remote viewing research and the future from 2040 to 2060. So I just wanted to start off with because we have a lot of new members, they're starting to get to know me and a little bit more about me. For those of you who already know about me, this might just be a little bit of repetition. But again, my name is Tim Paul Duffy. I'm the founder of Electus Society. Electus Society is a 501c3 non-for-profit, and our mission is to develop conscious leaders with real-world skills. So I've been doing leadership training and personal and professional coaching for almost 2 decades now, and I was part of the team to help create the largest leadership society in the country with over 1 million members across hundreds of chapters across the country. And then as a result of that experience, I was privileged enough to manage a lot of different people, over 600 of them. And we helped break records in terms of sales and customer retention. But that's where I really learned a lot about leadership and management. And so I was able to apply all that knowledge in the creation of Electus Society. So what are we going to be learning in today's training? First, we're going to start off with the discussion. Why do leaders really need to know about how to predict the future accurately? So we'll start off the discussion and then I'll share my insights. Then we're going to jump into part two, is all about remote viewing research and the history. Let's do a little recap. What is consciousness? What is remote viewing? We'll learn a little bit more about Stefan Schwartz, which a lot of his material has been used for the development of this training. He's one of the best leaders in terms of documenting the history of remote viewing, as well as doing remote viewing research into the future. We're going to talk about a couple of historical figures who have done remote viewing, from Nostradamus, who's very famous, and Edgar Cayce. But there's a danger whenever you start listening to media, different YouTube channels, all about Edgar Cayce and his future predictions for the world, doomsday sayers. That's actually what really inspired me to do this training again and open it up and share it with everybody, is because there's a lot of misinformation out there. And I realized that I've been doing all this research, and I think it's time that I start sharing this with the public, because more people need to know about this so that we really kind of eliminate that fear all about people who are really worried about the future. Then part three, we'll talk about what has all the research shown, right? What are the likely future events that are going to happen with respect to all these different areas? And this is not just one person who's saying that this is what's likely to happen in the future. This is based on research of over 6,000 people who have remote viewing into the future from 2050 and 2060. So in all these different areas, from climate change, energy, housing, health, artificial intelligence, transportation, politics, spirituality, and currency, and much more. And then we'll walk away with some specific action steps. So right now, we're going to start off, like we do with every training, with a grounding meditation. And this is not only for me, but for those of you who are watching this recording, there's no reason for you to fast forward it. This is a very important for you throughout your old busy day, to just get 2 minutes to ground yourself, to relax. And the reason why I think it's so important is it will help you retain the information that we're going to cover in this training, because there's going to be a lot of it. So feel free to turn off your camera, close your eyes. We'll play for this 2 minutes and enjoy. Okay.
Hello there, and welcome to this 2-minute meditation for grounding. Begin by sitting in a chair with your feet touching the floor. Relax your hands on your thighs with your palms facing upwards, and close your eyes. Begin to breathe slowly, in and out, noticing the feeling of how the air expands and contracts your belly and chest. Relax your body from head to toe and begin to imagine yourself in a beautiful, calming forest. Stay here and just admire the view, the trees, the sky, feeling the grass under your feet. Maybe it's autumn here and you feel the fallen leaves under your feet. As you stay here, relaxed and still, visualize how tiny roots begin to grow from the soles of your feet. These roots grow into the earth and make you feel grounded and secure. You now connect with Mother Nature's positive energy, making you feel so protected and loved. See how these roots begin to grow deeper and deeper into the earth, becoming thicker. Observe how you feel now, and when you feel ready, move your toes and fingers. Open your eyes and continue your day filled with centeredness, confidence, and compassion.
Namaste. All right, let's jump right in. Okay, so first, let's start off with a discussion. Why do you think it's important for leaders to be able to accurately predict the future? And also, another question that I would ask and open it up to everybody who wants to share, do you have any examples or stories about you successfully predicting the future? So I'm just going to share one quick anecdote, which I think is very cool. So, and it's actually not from me, it's from my father. And so my father and my mother, they separated. They had a very difficult divorce. And my father is a member of the Church of Latter-day Saints, what a lot of people refer to as Mormons. And he was doing missionary work, volunteering with the church. And while he was doing missionary work, and he lived in Port Washington, and he was doing work in Queens, and he wanted to visit a house. And as he was visiting this house, along with some other people with him, he walked up right to the front door. And before he even knocked or rang the doorbell, he's like, I'm eventually going to live in this house. That's the thought that eventually came out in his head. And guess what? At that house, my father met my future mother-in-law. They didn't date right away, but eventually started dating and my dad ended up actually living in there. So it's amazing what things happen to us where we, kind of get this premonition, this instinct, this gut instinct of what's going to happen in the future. With Electus Society, I knew that I wanted to create this right when I was in college, and I just had a vision for it. I already knew I had ideas for what the name was, and I just saved it and I bought the URL before I even did anything with it. So sometimes we do get that premonition. So I like to open it up to the group or chat. Feel free to raise your digital hand. Anybody like to share why you think it's important to predict the future or have any cool stories? Or am I just, oh, Yomerling, go ahead. Please share.
Um, well, there like one big story about like me like predicting the future
Huh?
or at least like manifesting what my future would be. Is that like in my childhood I always wanted to like live in Massachusetts because I lived in New York for my childhood because I wanted to be closer to my family and and be in a like safer neighborhood
Mhm.
and during the height like the beginning of the pandemic when it was like everything started to like shut down and like quarantine and stuff.
Mhm.
um I my parents and I moved to Massachusetts at when I was 15, so
Wow.
yeah.
So you had this feeling, and then you had this idea, and then as a result of the pandemic, you ended up moving there, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's really cool. No, thanks for sharing that cool story, right? Who else would like to share? Yin. Oh, how to raise your digital hand? But I'll just call upon you. Go ahead. I love to hear your thoughts. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
can
go ahead.
can you hear me? Okay. So if it's not a premonition, I want to say it's like a download.
Hmm.
It was like when I was like 25 or so, I was in the dorm sitting chatting with a roommate and she was really annoying me. And I didn't want to go down this conversation with her. And then, but I couldn't say no to her. At that moment, I want to get up and just leave the room, right? So, and then I got this download that I knew what she was going to ask me and what she was going to say.
Wow.
And at exact the time that she says the question, the phone is going to ring. And then she will get interrupted, and then she will get up and she will go answer the phone, but there's actually no one there. The phone will just ring to stop her from talking. And then at that time, I can get up and just say, oh, I got to leave. I have to run for something, right? So, and that came to my mind, and the exact thing happened. And then I knew what she was going to say the next two sentences, exact the words. And then the phone rang. She got up, she answered. I already knew. I said, she was saying hello. And I said, yeah, there's no one there. And then she was like, hello, hello, but there's no one there.
Wow.
And then she hung up, and I got up and said, oh, I forgot, I gotta run.
Wow.
That's my story, quick story.
I love that. That's an incredible
Yeah.
story. Thanks so much
Yeah.
for sharing.
Of course.
See, a lot of us have this ability, right? And as I'm going to talk later about in this presentation, as we talk about consciousness, we talk about awareness, accessing non-local consciousness. Imagine if you are in a situation, you're a leader or whatever, and this is what I'm going to talk about next. It's those little moments can help us. They can save us, right? And let's jump right into it, because I think it's very, very
By the
important.
way, how do you raise the digital hands?
Oh, it's basically there's like a different button on the Zoom settings, but in the meantime, I'm always monitoring the chat, so we can always share with you offline. But on
No
the bottom
problem.
of the chat, I think there may be something, or some of the settings.
Okay, I'll look around. Thank you.
No problem. So I'm going to share with you what I think are 3 reasons why leaders need to be able to accurately predict the future. Imagine you're the CEO. Imagine you're head of the military. If you don't make plans and you're wrong about them, guess what happens? A company could lose tremendous amounts of money. That could result in layoffs of people. You could end up getting people killed, right? So being able to accurately predict the future will actually have the benefit of providing protection and stability. It can really impact others, their life, liberty, their health, or people financially. So the second reason is it helps us to avoid unnecessary disasters, right? Anticipate or reduce potential natural disasters or any other human-caused disasters. So I'll give you some examples, like where people are actually living right next to a volcano, right? Knowing when that will erupt. First of all, I wouldn't even want to live near an active volcano, but if you choose to do so, like being able to escape on time, or forest fires, right? Things that you could do if you know that there's an area that's prone to forest fires. Well, there's a lot of the different things that you could do to help prevent that, right? Creating big lanes, so if they does catch on fire, homes and everything will be protective. But here's the frustrating thing: when as I've learned throughout life and as also learned throughout business, people are terrible at accurately predicting the future, and they just wing it, and they just hope. It's called hoping and praying, like that everything is just going to be just fine, when so many problems can be prevented. There's a famous line that says, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? If you can prevent a problem happening, you will spend so much less time trying to solve the problem after it's already happened. And then the third thing is eliminate fear, right? When we don't know when things are happening, when a storm is happening, we become frantic, right? We like, what do we do? I have no idea. And fear causes you to do very destructive things, right? Making you do actions that you regret. And so what ends up happening is we want to eliminate that, right? And how do we eliminate that? It's like you have to be a person that even though a tornado or a hurricane's all around you, you have to walk as if you're the eye in the center of that storm. So whatever chaos is happening around you, you have peace, you're calm, so that you can be focused, so you can accomplish what I like to call superhuman constructive actions. And I always like to use movie references. If you guys haven't seen the movie Dune, I highly recommend you watch it. I've not read the book, but there's this famous line from one of these, mysterious sect of like priestesses, and she has the Lady Jessica is her name, and I just love this quote: "I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer that brings obliteration, and I'll face my fear and I'll permit it to pass over me and through me. And when it is gone past, I will turn the inner eye," meaning your third eye, right? "And see the path. And where the fear is gone, there will be nothing, and only I will remain." Like, I'm like, wow, that's so, so powerful. So there's probably a lot of other reasons and stuff like that. And I just wanted to share with you, when it comes to predicting the future, remember what we're going to be talking about is remote viewing. And I'm going to explain what it is, but there's going to be a big difference between what we think is analytical, anticipating the future, and accessing non-local consciousness, right? Maybe a different part of the brain. So let's keep going. So I actually sent out in the notes of this calendar event, and for those people via email, a prerequisite for some of you to check out. It was all about what is consciousness. So if you haven't seen it, I'm going to do a quick recap. According to Wikipedia, the definition of conscious or consciousness is an awareness. That's the simplest term, right? But I like to add a little bit more. It really means you're accessing information, right? Of both the internal and external existence, what's happening within us and what's happening with around us. That's what it means to be conscious, to be awake, right? And there's just so many different debates right now between philosophers, theologians. Where does it come from? Is it with all in our brain, our DNA? Is it culture, or does it come from a higher power, right? So then there is something called, remote viewing. And so I'll just share with you, remote viewing is something that is talked about, and I'll give you the definition shortly. Well, let me just share with you right now what it is. Remote viewing is the practice of seeking impressions about distance or unseen objects, right? So Russell Targ and Harold Puthoff are considered the founders of remote viewing, right? They actually did research. Our government at the Stanford Research Lab worked with the defense to actually say, hey, can we use this to basically access information in terms of times of war and times of different situations, right? And there was people who were skilled at remote viewing. One of them his name was how do I pronounce it? Igno Swan. And why he was so good is he was a great artist. So when he was remote viewing and accessing what is non-local consciousness, he would draw pictures, and exactly what he would draw whenever they would visit that location, that's exactly what they found, right? There's a lot of other famous remote viewers. Joe McGonigal is one of them. And you can actually see them and search them on the internet or YouTube for different videos of their experience. But that's not what I really want to talk about. What I want to talk about is this guy. This is Stefan Schwartz. I used to call him Stephen Schwartz, but the correct pronunciation is Stefan Schwartz. And he basically has studied a lot about remote viewing from the past history to in terms of the future. And he says consciousness is fundamentally very important. And it all starts with, as we're starting to discover quantum physics. So I'm going to play this 4-minute clip, and it's very, very interesting about what is consciousness. And Max Planck, who is a very important scientist, a father of quantum mechanics, talked about consciousness. So let's play this clip right now.
Planck. Max Planck, father of quantum mechanics, was a man who didn't give a lot of interviews. In January of 1931, he gave an interview to the Observer newspaper. And the reporter who did the interview, one of the few that he did, said, "You and Einstein are the most famous scientists in the world. What have you learned?" Now, I don't know what he thought Planck was going to say. Something about atoms and molecules, maybe? I don't know. But instead, what Planck said was, what I've learned is that consciousness is causal and fundamental. You cannot get behind consciousness. Space-time, this is the one you can hear the sphincters tightening. Space-time arises from consciousness, not consciousness from space-time. And in 1944, at a physics conference in Pisa, Italy, he stood up and he said, I have spent my entire life studying atoms and molecules, but I'm sorry to tell you, they don't exist. They are expressions of consciousness. So the reason that Edgar Cayce is important, other than, I mean, there's wonderful stories, and I will share a couple of these things, but is that because of he is so extreme in his abilities, that you can see clearly what Planck was trying to say. Or as Edgar Cayce put it, mind is the builder. And he says it over and over again. And in fact, he talks a great deal about what it is he's doing. And that makes a difference because this is something that you can access. When you read a lot of stuff about consciousness, you read stuff about sending and receiving and signals. I mean, I read these books and these things. I'm sorry, there is no sending, there is no receiving, there is no signal. What's happening is you open to non-local consciousness. Now, most of the time, we are overwhelmed by the sensorial impressions that flood in to our neuroanatomy. It's hot, it's cold, it's dark, it's light, there's a smell, there's no smell, it's noisy, it's quiet, all that stuff. It's constantly flooding in. And it overwhelms this non-local aspect. And the way you get at the non-local aspect is that you have to be able to attain and sustain intentioned, focused awareness. That's why they teach meditation in martial art dojos, in Catholic monasteries, in Buddhist monasteries, in Japanese monasteries. That's why every religion has a part, as part of its program, teaching people how to attain and sustain intentioned, focused awareness. Now, when we look at the research data, what we see, for instance, with remote viewing, I'm one of the people that created remote viewing, is that meditators routinely do better than non-meditators. If you look at the healing literature, the scientific literature, you see that meditators do better than non-meditators. Why? Because meditation is a technique for attaining and sustaining intentioned, focused awareness. And when you do that, then the sensorial flood retreats into the background. And what in religion is called the still small voice comes out. And the reason that Edgar Cayce went into a trance is that's how he attained intentioned, focused awareness. And it is also how he disassociated. You know, in the pre-technological cultures.
All right. Very interesting. Now, again, I would be a little bit more humble. I wouldn't say he created remote viewing, but you know, I'll give it. He is a very, very important person in terms of the field of remote research. So I'll just pass on that one. But I have read his book, and it's called Opening to the Infinite, and I'll talk a lot about it. And what he said is, like, in the past, this is what the old paradigm used to be, right? The physicalist, the materialist model, everything is happening in the brain, right? Mind is solely the result of physiological process. Everybody is separate, right? Each consciousness is a discrete entity. There's only 5 senses, you know, taste, smell, touch, see, etc., etc. And there's only now, right? You know, only we're all operating on this third dimension between time and space, right? However, based on doing all this research, there is now a new paradigm that we're not all separate. We're an interdependent and interconnected consciousness model. So what does that actually mean? It says, yeah, things actually happen in the brain, but stuff is happening outside of the brain. Only certain aspects of the mind are a result of the physiological process. Consciousness, as he says, it's causal. It causes the reality. In that prerequisite video, I showed you about the double slit experiment where they said electrons, a little electron is passed through the slit, and when the observer is looking through it, it acts like a particle. But when they look away, it acts as a wave of potentiality, and it makes all these little different dots, like a wave through the water. And it's like, wow, like, and we can actually affect that, right? All life is interconnected. That means consciousness is part of a network of life, that it influences us and we influence it. And there's this collective consciousness, which I think a lot of Carl Jung and a lot of others have talked about. And guess what? Consciousness, whatever this is, this awareness that can access information, it exists not just in the present time. It can exist in the past, it can exist in the present, and it can exist in the future. All right. That's really, really cool to know, because again, this whole training is about accessing consciousness towards the future. So he also mentioned in the video the famous Edgar Cayce. And if you don't know Edgar Cayce or didn't see that prerequisite video, he's the most famous psychic or clairvoyant. What is a clairvoyant? It's somebody who acquires information that would be considered impossible, right? Through scientifically proven sensations. So it's classified as extrasensory perception or sixth sense. So Cayce was a devout Christian. He was a Sunday school teacher. He answered all these questions. He would like lie down on a couch and they would ask him questions about healing, about reincarnation, dreams, afterlife, past lives, nutrition, even Atlantis, and so much more, future events. That there was a foundation that was created called the Association of Research and Enlightenment, and which I'm a big fan of. I know the executive director, John Van Auken, who's amazing, and I shared with him in that prerequisite video. And here's the thing. He had did 14,000 readings. And the reason why we know that is because they were documented by his wife and other people, his secretary, all recorded every single conversation, everything he said, to each word written down. And so we have those collections of all those readings. And what's super spooky is 12,000 of them have come true. So, and somebody might say, and Y-Files did a video on him, and it basically says, is he a charlatan? You know, a lot of psychics can maybe infer. And he's like, well, psychics may be trying to scam people out of money, you know, people who are hopeless and desperate. But guess what? Edgar Cayce didn't charge people anything. He felt his life mission was to help people and to help heal. So again, I wouldn't categorize him as a charlatan because of that effect. But let's keep going. So we already talked about remote viewing. So this is the book that I have a copy of that I've read, where it's all about remote viewing research. There's so much in this book that I didn't have time to go into, but it would have been really cool. For example, he knows and has worked with remote viewers that, one, sketched out etches of where Saddam Hussein, what the compound looked like, where it was located, where he was actually hiding under the bunker, what he had with him, from a pistol to a briefcase full of cash. Like, all these remote viewers wrote everything down, and it's crazy. And he shows the images of the sketches before, you know, it was even shown on the news much later. Stefan Schwartz has used a lot of expert remote viewers to really find archaeological sites, which I think that's very noble and noteworthy. Cleopatra's Palace, Mark Antony's Timonium, right? The second, emperor past Julius Caesar was Mark Antony. Christopher Columbus did a lot of different voyages to and from the Americas and the Bahamas and all those different islands. And, you know, there's examples of ships that actually, you know, went down, and he was able to use remote viewers and do excavations and go deep sea in the water and find that wreckage, which I think is pretty cool. But the most important thing is he started in 1978. He's like, I want to start researching what's going to happen in the future. And the reason why that year was so critical is because he was worried that we were going to have a nuclear war, right? You know, the Cold War and all this other stuff. And all the futurists at the time, you might have heard those terms, people who love to predict the future. Well, guess what? Guess what they were predicting? They were predicting a population bomb, right? Where it's like we were going to become so populated that it's going to use up all the resources. And it's like, that hasn't happened, right? So it's very important that you be accurate. And there was a lot of different areas around the country, 3 specific areas that had started doing remote research, and Stephen Schwartz actually created a paper that I will actually include in the notes. It's called Through Time and Space, the Evidence of Remote Viewing, that actually goes through the history of remote viewing. If you go to what the CIA has done, they unclassified some documents into, I think it was the 1990 or 1995. And what they said is remote viewing doesn't work, right? There's no evidence that it actually works. That's actually not true. You can do experiments where people are like, okay, hold up a card. What is the picture that I'm holding? And you can do that over and over again. And Stephen Schwartz says that stuff, he's done those tests. And what ends up happening is people, remote viewers, really get bored doing that, right? Because there's no stakes. There's no, with respect to just answering pictures on a card all the time. But remote viewers, as the book is outlined, and there's so many examples, have been used in solving crime, right? Whatever you believe, if you had a loved one and they were murdered, right, and all the cops and all the detectives can't go and find anything, guess what? Whether you believe in religion, spirituality, whatever it is, you'd find if there was somebody that you know that had the ability to access non-local consciousness and to give you some insight to clues, well, guess what? It happens, and there's some amazing stories where criminals were found, and help people solve crimes. But guess what? They exist right now, but the police force. Think about how much negative publicity, people are afraid of, and so they're not going to advertise, yes, we solved this crime using a remote researcher or a remote viewer, because people are like, what are you doing? And they would be criticized or made fun of. So they do it in quiet, right? So, and also Congress basically said, what, you're doing remote viewing? What is this stuff? This sounds like, woo-woo crazy stuff. And so it's like, no, they stopped funding it, but guess what? It's still going on, but it's just more on the down low. But I'm very happy that more and more is coming about. And remember where I said Russell Targ was and Hal Puthoff were some of the founders of remote viewing. He actually made a testimonial for the book, and I think it's quite impressive, which shows how important Stephen Schwartz is. He's like, based on 3 decades of research, this book, Opening into the Infinite, Schwartz presents comprehensive information on the most successful physical and physiological approaches discovered in the laboratory to increase the accuracy and reliability of remote viewing. So that's straight from Russell Targ. All right, so another one thing from this book, again, because I just wanted to share with you the background. Who's one of the most famous scientists? Carl Sagan, right? And so Carl Sagan earlier was very, very critical, but another Cornell professor approached him and he's like, hey, you're talking about this stuff. And I'm like, you should really do the research. And so that colleague of Carl Sagan gave him the research, and then he wrote a book, I think it was in the 1990s, I think it was 1997, and that quote from that book, Stephen Schwartz included it into his book, Opening into the Infinite. And here's what it was. There are 3 claims in the ESP, which stands for extrasensory perception field, which in my opinion, directly from Carl Sagan, that deserve serious study. One is that thought alone, humans can, he said barely, but they can really affect it, a random computer number generator, right? So our thoughts can affect our reality, right? That's proven scientifically. Number 2, people in mild sensory deprivation, think of like Stranger Things, where Eleven's like in a floating tank. All it is a deep meditation, and we don't have to be in saline water and float in a tank in order to have this ability. But it says they can receive thoughts and images projected at them, meaning accessing non-local consciousness. We can actually see things from far distances. Guess what? Present, past, and future. And 3, that young children sometimes report the details of a previous life, which upon checking turns out to be accurate, which they could not have known about in any other way than reincarnation. Now, again, Carl Sagan is a scientist. So the fact that he's talking about reincarnation, mind blown. And remember, Carl Sagan wrote the book Cosmos, and then they made it into a film or like a documentary. And he worked at Cornell, and Neil deGrasse Tyson, again, one of the most famous astrophysicists, met Carl Sagan, and he said that Carl Sagan inspired him to be a scientist, right? So again, look at that. It's just unbelievable. So I thought that I'd share this very, very cool video. It's just a 2-minute clip. Stefan Schwartz, he is a scientist. He doesn't talk about the woo-woo. He doesn't talk about religion or spirituality. He's just like, just give me the facts, give me the data. That's all I care about. And he basically says, no, there is actually research on reincarnation. And it's very taboo, but it's starting to become bigger and bigger. And this goes into alignment with consciousness, that this consciousness exists outside of time, right? And so there's he mentions a guy by the name of Ian Stevenson, who basically started to study people who claimed that they had past lives and started to notice the biology, scars, and different things. And I've read this book because I was like trying to find the story about this incredible story that Stefan Schwartz mentioned. But guess what? It was actually Stefan Schwartz who witnessed this example firsthand. So I want you to hear this story about a boy in India who was murdered in a past life, and he was a moneylenderer and had an affair with a woman. So check out. This is just so incredible. I had to share it with all of you. So let's do it.
There's a great deal of reincarnation research done by Ian Stevenson and now by Jim Tucker, for instance, that shows that what comes across between lives is information. That is, people come across with memories, or they come across scar tissue or birthmark where something happened to them. Give you an example of a case I personally studied. This was in India. So I had this little boy, and he said that he, in a previous life, had been a moneylender, and that he had had an affair with a woman whose husband was a woodcutter, and that he had been killed by the woodcutter. We took him to the village that he said he had this previous life in, that nobody from his village even knew existed. We took him to the village, and when he got to the outskirts of the village, he walked immediately into the village as if he knew what he was doing, and he walked up to a particular house, and he knocked on the door. Older woman answered the door, and he called her by a pet name, a lover's name, and if she was startled, no one has called me that in years, that was my lover's name, and she told the story, and she said, I had an affair with a moneylender who had loaned us some money, and my husband was a woodcutter, and he came back one day and he caught us. And as my lover was trying to crawl out the window, my husband took his axe and killed him by striking him on the back. Now, the really weird part of this deal is this little boy had like a scar on exactly the place where the woodcutter had hit him in the previous life, had hit him with an axe.
Is that an incredible story or what? And there's actually more to the story, because I've heard that story in a different interview of Stefan Schwartz, and he basically said that there was a brick in the wall, and that was a loose brick, and he actually hid stuff in there. And I don't know if it was this case or another, but the little boy goes over to that wall, pulls out the loose brick, and is able to tell the person what was in that brick. And there was like some little kind of trinket or some little thing in that hidden brick. How did that boy know exactly where that was located? Again, just incredible stories. This boggles the mind, right? But in case you're more interested about that, there's Ian Stevenson's book. I recommend you check it out. And again, these are scientists. This is not something that scientists would love to advertise, because they have to follow a strict code. Like, it's all based on statistics, data, what is collected, reporting, and it's very academic, but it's very, very fascinating. So what does Stefan Schwartz say about remote viewing? Well, it's very important for you to learn, just like in statistics, that almost everything, I don't know if everything is, but is always in the shape of a bell curve. What does that mean, right? That, like, you take something, for example, as IQ in a population. Well, if you measured a bunch of different people, there's going to be some people with low IQ and some people with high IQ, but those are the extremes. But most of the people are going to be right here in the middle, right, with the frequency or quantity. And the same thing with height of women, right? If you took all the women and you say, how tall are you? Well, there's going to be some women are short, some are going to be super tall, but the majority of them are going to be within this range. Well, just like a bell curve is associated with these types of skills or attributes, well, that's what it is with remote viewing. He says that 11% of the population is really, really good at remote viewing, right? But it doesn't mean that you can't be a successful remote viewer. If you, and he recommends meditators on average are better remote viewers than others. And if you practice more and more meditation, you'll be much better at being able to access non-local information, right? Non-local consciousness. And it's why are they so good? It's because they're able to maintain and sustain focused awareness. And just think about this, like you look in, and he mentions it in an earlier video, like martial arts. Like imagine you're about to chop a board and all these people are looking at you and you try to hit it and you don't, and your hand hurts and everything like that, and all these people are staring at you. You are taking in all this information, but if you could quiet the mind, and have peace and calm, and just think about that board and put your hand through that board, envision that board, and with clear focus, boom, you could actually break that board. The same thing with golfers who swing a golf ball and hit it and are able to get it into the hole, like so many people with anything. And so the more and more you practice it, the better that you'll be. And so he basically also says that 75% of the remote viewing data is useful, but the other 24% is not useful at all. Because again, this is all coming from Stefan Schwartz. He only is looking at verifiable data. Okay. And he says that finding analytical data when you're talking to remote viewers, remote viewing accesses a different part of our brain, right? Some say it's, the left brain is the logic, right brain is more creative, sensorial, right? And so it's like when people are remote viewing and accessing, it almost looks like they're watching a dream, and they can say, oh, I see a color, I see this person's doing, but then you say, well, how tall is that person? It's like they don't know, because that would require measurements, right? That requires those kind of things. So also when you're doing remote viewing and picking up all these impressions, he did research on Christopher Columbus's ship that sank. And so when he did all these remote viewers, they would report back to him. He's like, this individual, I'm sensing that, thoughts, feelings, images, descriptions, that he's very worried about his wife and his family. So guess what Stephen Schwartz says? He can't, he's like, I'll write that down, but he's like, that data is not useful. Why? Because having the feeling that you're worried about your family, there's no way as a researcher that Stefan Schwartz can actually verify that that's true. So he discards it. So he's only looking at useful data that can be predicted and accurate. Like you got to respect him for his level of methodology, right? And he basically says, he goes concept by concept, word by word. What did this remote viewer see? This person was wearing a red jacket, okay? And then another person says a tan jacket. And so, but if you talk to 8 other remote viewers and they all say tan jacket, well, guess what? The person who said it was a red jacket, it's partially correct because he got the fact that it was a jacket, but the color was wrong. So he's going to use the preponderance of evidence to actually make more accurate predictions. And I thought that this was a funny thing to include. He says that there was big differences in between the sexes, right? Women were more likely to get the color of the car, while men were more likely to get the make and model of the car, right? And so again, that's just left brain, right brain differences between individuals. So this is another cool story, because I said this is going to be the history of remote viewing. And guess what? In the 550s BCE, there was there was a king, Croesus of Lydia, which is also known as Turkey, and Herodotus, who was the first historian, that he's considered the father of history, wrote down this story of what King Croesus did, and it's the first documented remote viewing in our history. So I want to play the video. It's really cool for you to check out. Let's watch it.
Are an example. In fact, the oldest remote viewing that we know about that's on record, and it was done exactly the way we would do it today, is in the 46th chapter of Herodotus's Histories of the World. Herodotus is the first historian, and he wrote a book called The Histories of the World, and he describes a circumstance in the 5th century BCE involving Croesus, the king of the Lydians. Lydia is a part of Turkey now, but at that time was an independent kingdom. And Croesus got wind that the Persians under Cyrus were about to attack him. And so what to do? And Herodotus reports this story that I'm about to tell you. And so Croesus, no dummy he, created 7 embassies, 7 little teams of people, and he told them to go to the 7 oracles of the ancient world and to wait for the 100th day. And on the 100th day, they were to ask, what is Croesus, son of Alyattes, king of the Lydians, doing at this time? Outbound remote viewing. And so the 7 teams went out. The only one whose answer we know, because it was the correct one, was the oracle at Delphi. Now, Delphi is an example of what I'm talking about. This was an oracle that was built, the temple was built over a cleft in the earth in which some, not all, but many researchers believe hydrocarbons bubbled up and had a psychoactive, it was like a drug. It was like taking, I don't know, LSD. And young women, the Pythonesses they were called, would sit in this kind of tripod cat's cradle thing, and these gases would bubble up, and these girls would go into a kind of altered state of consciousness. And you could ask them questions, and they would speak, just like Edgar Cayce. So on the 100th day, the team that went to the oracle at Delphi went in, and before they could even speak, the Pythoness said, I can count the sands of time, the 100 days. I see the great ocean that they had traveled from Lydia to where the Delphi oracle was. I see a great bronze urn, boiling water, and a hare and a tortoise being cut up and thrown into the pot, and a great bronze lid. Now, that didn't make any sense to the people that were listening to it, but they wrote it all down and they took it back. And when they got back to Lydia and they told Croesus what the oracle at Delphi had said, he bowed down and gave obeisance, because he had said to himself, you know, if they say Croesus is sitting on his throne issuing orders or edicts, well, of course, he's the king. So instead, he had a tripod brought in a great bronze urn and a hare and a tortoise, and he cut them up and threw them into the water, the boiling water. That technique actually is an outbound experiment. So people have been doing this for a long time, millennia. Remote viewing is not new in the sense that what is new is that we design protocols that meet scientific standards. But the idea of opening to non-local consciousness is
Okay, there it is.
Are an example.
So, hold on. So again, what was so interesting about that story, it was almost like a double-blind research experiment, because only the king knew exactly what he was going to do, but he didn't tell his messengers, and so they had to then give the information to the oracles, and whoever was accurate was the most accurate remote viewer. So again, very interesting. So there's also throughout history other famous remote viewers. Nostradamus was one of them. I'm going to include this as an additional resource because I want to make sure that we have time to cover, because there's just so many cool clips and videos. But again, Nostradamus, existed during the time of the Black Plague. So those were times where all these people were getting sick, and they would just somebody in a car would say, ring a bell and saying, bring out your dead, and you would just load your family members. It was like pretty crazy. And so he was the only individual at that time who said, like, oh my goodness, we have the Black Plague, and he would tell them exactly what they needed to do. And he basically got them to clean all their sheets, empty out their house, which means there would be no more rats in the house, and that they would hang them up in the sun. And then he would give them herbal remedies, which was rose hips, which was vitamin C to boost their immune system. It was pretty cool. And also in this video, Nostradamus was able to actually see in visions all the future popes of the Roman Catholic Church. And he goes through each one of them, including popes that were murdered. And so that was kind of crazy because he predicted which popes would actually be murdered and what happened. And so in this video is a very cool story about the murdering of one of these popes, right? But you'll have to watch that to check it out. And the only other cool thing that I'll share with you, I don't know what it means, but he says that this pope that we have right now, according to Nostradamus, was the last pope of the Roman Catholic Church. What does that mean? Does that mean that there's going to be potential change? Is the Roman Catholic Church going to no longer have popes? Does that mean that a natural disaster is going to happen in Italy and it's going to affect Rome? I have no idea, but I'm just sharing with you this information. Again, one data point, just something for you to keep in mind. The other was this video about Edgar Cayce in this that the Y Files did. And again, if you go to the internet and you type in Doomsday or Edgar Cayce prophecy, they're going to be the most famous prophecy that he did was about talking about the pole shifts and the changes that were going to happen. And the Y Files did this video, and he says, "Oh my goodness, Doomsday!" And they show this map, like that poles are going to shift, sea levels are going to rise, and it's going to cause all this havoc. But here's the problem. I went to do the research. That's why I enjoy Y Files, this YouTube channel that does tries to do a balance where they said, here's this crazy stuff that people say, but as a skeptic, this is what we would say. You decide, right? But in this video, I decided to do some research. So take his videos of the Y Files as entertainment, but you have to do a lot more research to get to the truth of it. So this doomsday map that's constantly quoted in is a future map that is done by this remote viewer called Gordon Michael Scallion. Okay, and he's the one who did this map. And actually, one of the reasons, like I shared with you in the beginning, why I wanted to do this training to share with all of you is because I'm sick and tired of people quoting this map of this is what's actually going to happen, because it causes a lot of panic and fear, right? To see like, oh my goodness, look at Europe's wiped out, all of California is gone, what's going to happen? You know, apparently this land's going to pop up, it's going to be Atlantis, like all this crazy stuff is happening, but it's like, this is being attributed to Edgar Cayce, but this is not what Edgar Cayce actually said. You have to actually do the research. So again, I heard people quote this map, people that I admire, right, who are in the field of spirituality and things like that on some of the podcasts that I listen to. And when I heard them referencing Edgar Cayce in this map, I'm like, no, we end this. You know, we got to eliminate this confusion. So I'm taking the responsibility to helping to educate the public. So this is what Michael Gordon Scallon said in this map when he created in 1993. Look at all the sea level rising, look at all this water coming through, and then look at all along the coast, right? So I started listening to all the different videos of Gordon Michael Scallion. So this was the first wrong prediction that he gave that I found out that in this video, right, it's called Gordon Michael Scallion's prediction, 1995 to 1997. I read the whole transcript. I live on Long Island, New York, and he predicted at that time, he says, I see that in 96 or 97, I don't see big changes to Long Island, but after 98, I see most of Long Island completely underwater. Okay, what? Excuse me? I live on Long Island. You're saying it's underwater? That's what he was making in during this prediction, right? So that was not accurate. And so then you come to him in later interviews, and this is what he says. And this is what he said, quote, these maps, I created this maps to answer all the questions that I've had from thousands upon thousands of questions over the years to try to put into one graphic illustration to say, this is what happened or may happen, but it's not 100%. But I'm assured that this is what it looked like, and this is the reality of the future. It hasn't changed. My predictions haven't been changed. The map is the map. In 20 years of doing this, is that I said those visions are still the same. The only thing we don't know is the date of this, but we do have the warning signs to watch for, and overall, that's where the changes are okay. So basically, he's saying he's washing his hands that he didn't make any wrong predictions. And I'm like, no, I just had you recorded on a video saying that the entire Long Island would be flooded, and now you're saying no, my recommendations haven't changed. We just don't know when. So again, if some people got value from him and gave him some insight, I'm not dogging it, but to me, you can't take this one example as the truth, right? Even all remote viewers, and this is something that Stephen Schwartz, if you go on a video right now and you see a channeler, remotes, what's going to happen in 2024 or 2025, that's just one person. How accurate are they? We're talking about as leaders, you have to operate like a journalist would in researching a story. If you're trying to find out about an individual, you just can't talk to that person's mother and say, "Oh, my child is so great." You need to interview the neighbors, you need to friends, and then only through the preponderance of evidence do you actually kind of get a true picture of what that person is. The same thing with it is with the future. So what is actually going to happen in the future, right? So Edgar Cayce, one of the most successful remote viewers, and right, because he documented everything, this is what he actually said when I read the books word for word. He said, for many portions of the East Coast will be disturbed. Okay, we got it. Many portions of the West Coast, as well as the central portion of the US. Very interesting. So it's not just the coast, but it's also the center of the US. In the next few years, lands will appear in the Atlantic as well in the Pacific, and what is the coastline now of many land will be on the bed of the ocean, meaning sea level is going to rise or the land is going to depress, and whatever's the beach right now is going to be under the ocean. So even many of the battlefields present will be in the ocean. Again, remember, Edgar Cayce lived during the Civil War, right? You know, he died in like the 1940s. Okay. Um, the lands over which the new order will carry on their trade is one. Portions of now the east coast of New York City itself will in the main disappear. Now that's very interesting. There will be, this will be in another generation. Now I'm going to pause right here, okay? Because when someone says, okay, it's going to happen in the next generation, we think of families, right? It's like the next generation is you have your grandparents, you have your, their children and their children. So it's like a generation is in most people colloquially is 20 to 30 years. So if he's making this prediction, he's like, oh, in the next generation, that could be wrong, right? Like 20, 30 years. But there's different definitions of generations. And I actually discovered, I'm like, is Edgar Cayce wrong about that? Did he just get the whole time? No, it's all depends on the definition of generation. When I looked up into science, science has different definitions of a generation, whether it's cells or whatever. It's when everybody who's alive at this moment is all dead. So what is the average lifespan of the human potential is about 100 years. So if he's making these predictions around the 1940s, and guess what? And we're going to get to it, that these predictions are going to happen around 2040. Well, that's about approximately 100 years. So all the people who are alive, my grandparents and stuff, your grandparents, all born in the early 1900s, they're all passing away now, right? Or close to, or may have already have. Okay, very interesting to know. Though here, while the southern portions of the Carolina, Georgia, these will disappear, this will be much sooner. Okay. The waters of the lakes will empty into the Gulf. So the Great Lake is all around Michigan and Wisconsin and all those different areas. And it's going to say the lakes will empty into the Gulf of Mexico. And if you look at a US map, and we're going to show it, it's like that's where like Louisiana and others, where the Mississippi River all flows. So that's all going to disappear. So again, store that in your head. Very interesting. Rather than the waterway over which such discussion has been recently made, it would be well if the waterway were prepared, meaning start preparing for this waterway to be flooded, but not for the purpose for which it's being presently considered. Then the area where the entity is now called Virginia Beach will be among the safety lands, right? And portions of now Ohio, Indiana, etc. So now at least we're starting to get a clearer picture. Where are other safe areas? Southern portions of Canada, eastern portions of Canada, western land, much of that will be disturbed in this land, of course, and much other lands. So again, very interesting. Now, this is one point of data, Edgar Cayce. Now let's go into more. So here's what Stephen Schwartz did from 1978. He did about 4,000 remote viewers all up into 2050, right? Let's just see it. Okay, on this date in 2050, what do you see? What happened? Give me your observations following all the different methodology, right? And so then he decided to do two things. He's like, I want to ask another question. Is what happened in 2050 happened for sure? Or does it mean that was what was most likely to happen based upon what was happening in that world at that time? Well, has things changed? If we have free will, we can change our destiny. So what he wanted to do is now, in more recent times, he's like, I'm going to look at 2060, and then I want to compare how much does the remote viewers say about 2060 match with 2050. And because he's a really good scientist, he's like, I need a group and I need a control group, right? Just like you do a placebo, whatever. I'm also going to do a random control trial, what I call rationals. So I'm going to use their left analytical side of their brain to say, I don't want you to remote view. I just want you to ask from logic, what do you think is going to happen in the future, right? Based on what you know, like write it down and would have, and so that he would try to compare that data. Now, let me share with you something. I've been listening to Stephen Schwartz for almost 2 to 3 years trying to get this data, right? Because as a leader, I want to know what's going to happen, help plan in terms of contingency. So he has developed his own website, schwartzreport.net. And what he does on his website, you can say he's like, I'm currently compiling all this information. He has over 10,000 pages of data, right? And it all needs to be collected, collated in order for him to come up with a book on what is the vision future for 2060, right? So I signed up, I listened, I subscribed to his newsletter. And so almost every day of the week, he would get a Schwartz report, right? Here are all the trends that are in alignment with my data, right? Waiting. When is this book going to come out? It never comes out, right? I've been waiting for 3 years. And so I decided that I couldn't wait. So I just had to listen to over 10 plus interviews, hours long, and re-listening to them to try to take notes and really write down. I don't know if he'll ever finish this book, but here was the conclusions, and I'm going to share with you all of it right now. Again, so I've saved you guys, a lot of hours of doing this research. But I also want to give another side tangent. I want to acknowledge Stephen Schwartz for all the tremendous work that he's done. But just because he's done all this work, it doesn't mean I agree with him 100%. And again, this is something that was likely to happen to the future. And the reason why I share that is because, this is just pure speculation. But his Schwartz report is all what he does is he combs through all the newspapers and medias and stuff of what's happening in the country. And I have perceived a cognitive bias of his. He is very, very, very pro Democrat and anti-Republican. And so for him, his objectives is he believes that he's doing great work. He believes that we need to expand consciousness and make choices. And I've been very inspired by a lot of his work. But I find that if you are for something and against something, it will cloud your judgment in terms of the information. So a lot of the kind of media and the reports that I was getting was all negative about the Republicans and how blue states are the right thing and only Democrats are going to save us. And it's like, you know what? I have a different perspective. I need to be objective and I need to see, whether you're Democrat or Republican, what are your policies? And it's different. And he claims that blue states are where all the social economic, is better for the country and that red states are backwards. And I can see that criticism in certain aspects. But if you look at what's happening into California, you could take whether you're a progressive liberal or conservative, there is something inherently inside of us. I call it the ego that wants to either be selfish or control other people. So just because what's happening in California, they're being very criticized in terms of a lot of people are leaving California because they don't like the government policies. Just because you say that you care about these things, people don't feel safe. There's much more crime and all these other things. So I would challenge Stephen Schwartz that it just, just because you vote for a blue state doesn't mean all the different qualities of life and standards are going to be better. So again, I wrote to him, I shared with him, I appreciated all his work, but there was too much negativity coming into my inbox, and I need to stay in a positive state of emotional state. And you are what you feed your mind. And I said, thank you for all your great work, but I can't keep listening to these Schwartz reports because it was all about, abortion, and the religious right and all the dangers. And I say, if you're listening to the media, you almost need to take a shower because it's so talkative. There's so much fear that's being thrown at you from propaganda and stuff like that. And guess what? Whatever I'm going to share with you about the future trends, if you could live at any other point in time in the history, now is the best time. We have access to more resources. Yeah, things could be better in some things, but things are better than they were in the past, and we have to keep a positive outlook. So again, forgive me for going on that tangent. You're more than welcome to sign up to Schwartz Reports and wait for the book to come out. But for me, I've unsubscribed, and I still have his YouTube channel. He does now YouTube videos about it, and I'll occasionally listen, but it's tough because there's just so much negativity coming out, and it's hard to listen. So again, still respect the man for what he's brought to us. So what have I discovered based on doing all this research? Okay, on the 10 different areas, here's what they are. There's going to be major changes in climate change and energy. And what the most important climate changes that are going to happen are going to occur between 2040 and 2045. All right. And he doesn't say it's just one event, it's a confluence of different events. And I'm going to talk about them. And he thinks that it's mostly climate change and energy. The next area is food, housing, health, transportation, politics, spirituality, currency, and artificial intelligence. Now, the first thing that he says that all the remote viewers, or the majority of them, based on consensus, have found that there's going to be too much water on the coasts, okay, and along the river delta. So wherever there's major rivers, right, and the river deltas, because it's very, very low elevation, it's going to be flooded. In the coasts, they're going to be flooded. And how high will they be flooded? Well, we don't know. Based on where the remote viewer was, whether they were in Miami, whether they're in California, whether they were on the East Coast, it varied from 3 feet to 20 feet. Now, remember how I said the remote viewing can't do anecdotal left, like how many feet lower is the elevation? What he would do is he would actually ask the person to stand where they are, walk, whatever, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 paces, right? And say, where's the water hitting you, right? And then he would use their height and do calculations to figure out that area, how deep was the water, how much has the water risen. And so that's why he gives a range, depending on the location, 3 to 20 feet. Now, I'm going to go on another tangent right here. A lot of people, if you listen to the media, climate change, greenhouse gases are warming up the earth, all the icebergs are going to melt, and we're all going to be flooded. That's not necessarily true. Now, here's the problem in the media where they talk about climate science. Remember, I like to listen to both sides and listen to different science and research. There is a scientist who I highly respect. He was a geologist, and now he talks about spirituality and things like that. And he says he's looked at the geological record, and when you look at ice cores within Antarctica, they can measure based on how much carbon dioxide is in the atmosphere, what the temperature was, and they found out that the Earth warmed before there was any increases in carbon dioxide. So the Earth has the potential to warm the planet regardless of carbon dioxide emission. Now, does this mean that I believe that releasing carbon dioxide and other methane gases and stuff won't cause Earth climate change or warming? No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that could be a factor. But the problem with a lot of the climate scientists now is the weather and climate is so complicated that anytime somebody makes a prediction, they're not accurate predictions. Think about how hard it is to predict the weather, how hard it is to predict climate change. But what I think a lot of people are missing about the climate change debate is they don't realize that we lay on tectonic plates. So not only can icebergs melt, it can cause a rise in sea level, but guess what? Lands can shift. If you're on a boogie board in a bathtub, you could go up and down. So you could actually sink. We're on different plates are floating on molten lava. So you could actually have Earth declining or dipping down and causing a sea level rise, having nothing to do with icebergs melting, right? Regardless of whether or not they are. And we've seen evidence that they have melted, right? So this is what I want to share with you. And I even sent an email out that we've been depleting so much groundwater that the land has been subsiding just because of depletions of sucking up so much groundwater. So that could be another factor that's causing the land to subside and sea level to rise. Okay, but an important thing to know. So right now, most people live on the coast. There's going to be 50 million refugees, and there's going to be a collapse in coastal real estate, right? You're already starting to see trends where, insurance, they won't provide you insurance unless you're 100 feet away from the different coastline, or they're just going to charge you so much more, things like that. Here's what Stefan Schwartz said based on a bunch of remote viewers. New York, the lower half of New York City is going to be underwater. The lower half of Florida is going to be underwater, anything below Fort Myers. Key West, Florida, Miami, Florida. In California, Los Angeles, California, Santa Monica, Venice, Manhattan Beach. In Virginia, largely underwater. North Carolina, the Outer Banks, New Orleans, parts of Hawaii, Baltimore, and Boston. Now, how do you know wherever you live, whether you're near a river or something like that? There's this really cool link called Coastal Climate Central. And so I'm just going to click on it. I'm going to show you, you can choose a map and you just put the water level. And so wherever you want to be, let's just say I'm going to search for New York City, right? And they'll show a map and I can see what happens if the water level rose 3 feet. What if it rose 20 feet, right? It'll calculate that, you see? And then it will show you where you live, where the water level will rise. So to me, this is a very good feature in order for you to help plan and mitigate any coastal flooding in near rivers, etc. Okay? So let's go back to the presentation. Next is, I live in New York, in a suburb outside New York City. This is a LaGuardia airport. I'm already starting to see them starting to put up seawall barriers. So they're already anticipating, sea levels already rising. And guess what? If there's a storm, whatever the water is, the water goes even higher than the sea level. So it's a big problem. This is a house that was happened off the southern coast of Long Island, New York. And I remember having friends who lived in Oceanside, Long Island. And remember, I studied geology when I was in college. So I always knew about hurricanes. My professor was the expert on Northeast hurricanes. And I told my friends at that time, hey guys, do you guys know that you're in a dangerous hurricane zone, that you will get flooding? And guess what the response was from my friends and their parents? Like, don't worry, we've been living here for years. We got flood insurance, so it's not a problem. Well, guess what happened? Hurricane Sandy came and totally wiped a bunch of houses and flooded them all. And now all along Oceanside and other parts of southern, Long Island, New York, they're raising and jacking up the houses in order to not have this happen to them again. Again, 6 feet to 8 feet or more all along the different areas. So this was Hurricane Sandy. Look at all the water, like devastated. It crushed their porch, letting into the house. And now, boom, look at, they're all raising the houses. This is in 2017. So again, whether you believe in global warming, climate change or not, it's like, this is just smart urban suburban planning, right? The second big climate change things that's going to happen, we're going to have too little water and it's going to be too hot. And this is going to especially happen in the Southwest. So Phoenix, Arizona, this is what I couldn't believe. Like if they have currently 150 days where the temperature gets to 120 degrees. Do you know how hot 120 degrees is? If I was in New York and it became 120 degrees, there'd be on newscast, local emergency, stay inside your home, stay cool, we have shelters. Because guess what happens when the temperature's so high? You can't work, you can't focus, you can't go outside. And what's even worse is, what if everybody's are in their homes blasting their AC and trying to get cool, like in California and others, and Texas, they have what's called rolling blackouts, where they basically, and there's just too much electricity, we have to shut these down, and you'll be without air conditioning. If you're senior citizens, that's why they say evacuate, go to other safe areas. So Phoenix, Arizona, Tucson, Arizona, Albuquerque, New Mexico, again, some places that you may want to reconsider. I'm going to share this as an additional resource, these 2 videos that were very cool. Again, Stefan Schwartz all talked about Lake Mead and Lake Powell. Listen, although I was born in California, I've been living in most of New York for the last 20 years. I don't know about Lake Mead or Lake Powell. These are lakes that were created when dams were put right along the Colorado River to provide electricity and for water purposes. But guess what? water is being depleted so much that it's actually risks reading the Deadpool zone. That means that not only will be able to have electricity, but no water is going to be able to flow out of the dam, and that's a huge problem. So, agencies, government, they've even asked the federal government to intervene to stop, conserve water because and you can see in these videos images of like the area where 20 years ago the water was up here, and like 20, 30, 35 feet, like wow, like you could seen the water deplete. Guess what, people? This is only going to get worse, and so this is a huge problem. And what these videos talk about, where's all this water going? Well, guess where the water is being used? Colorado River. It helps Utah, Nevada, Arizona, California, the Colorado River. Guess what? That's a lot of it is used for agriculture, for growing alfalfa. And where do they do without alfalfa? They ship it and it's used to feed livestock, right? Beef and everything like that. So again, so whenever they say, okay, conserve water, it's like, well, where's most of this water going? It's like what you do in your home to conserve water might be good, but it's a pin drop compared to how much water is used in agriculture to feed the demand for beef. Very interesting. The other thing is cataclysmic storms, tornadoes, and this is going to be along the central US. So now are you starting to see how this is matching up with what Edgar Cayce says, that the flood of the Great Lakes is going to flow all the way into the Gulf Coast? And I didn't know about this because all along here, look at this. There's tornadoes happening all over. When you have tornadoes and storms, a whole bunch of water is dropped off and dumped. And again, these are different storms that are happening. And there's a famous video in one of the interviews with Stephen Schwartz where he's like, he's talking to a Republican mayor of some town, right? And so he was interviewing the mayor. He's like, I don't believe in climate change, like I think he's like, okay, fine, whatever you want to believe in, right? But again, I don't necessarily disagree with some of the points. Maybe climate change is already happening. The earth is warming with even out the carbon emissions, but maybe that could just maybe make it worse. But again, that's a side point. But what's so interesting is what the Republican mayor did say. He's like, but I do have to admit, and then Stephen Schwartz was listening. He's like, well, how often do you need to rebuild a town? He's like, what do you mean? He's like, well, we had a tornado come in and completely wipe out the town. And so we then rebuilt the whole town. And then another tornado came and wiped it all over again. So how many times are we going to build this town where we would say, hey, we need to move and stop? Like, this is a problem. So again, there is technology out there. There's different designs and ways to build homes that prevent them and make them tornado resistant. And I'm just going to tell you, because I've listened to a lot of these things, it's building house in the form of cones. Because if you build a cone shaped type of house, a tornado can pass and cannot grab and lift off the roof. So again, just very, very interesting. But we need leaders who are forward thinking and can plan this in order to mitigate these disasters. And so this was a tracker of all these different tornadoes that are happening. And then this is all this basin, all these different rivers from all the different storms come in and they affect all these different rivers. And then if you click on the mapping of the Mississippi River, I'm just going to click on this real quick so I can show you. It basically says all these rivers are being flooded, right? From its flooding of people who live on the floodplain. So look at, this is what I was just showing with you. So the yellow lines are all levees, trying to prevent the river from flooding all these nearby areas. It's affecting Tennessee, Arkansas, Mississippi, Louisiana, and look, New Orleans, all this area, all the levees, right? And there's getting more and more inundation of water. Here's the Mississippi Delta. Look at all this flooding, right? And they're trying to build up all these walls to prevent from flooding. Illinois, and this is an article that's several years old. It's saying people have to actually move because there's so much more water on these low-lying areas. So I just thought that it's very important to share with you that this is happening, okay? So massive migrations away from the East Coast, away from the West Coast, and out of the Central because of all the flooding. So again, areas up here and areas up here, wherever there's high elevation here are going to be safer areas. The next big changes in 2040 and 45 are energy, right? So there's going to be the end of the internal combustion engine. And so also they said that cars are going to be very different. They're going to build a base of the car. And so people are then going to be able to choose, and then whether they want a wagon, a van, or whatever it is. And then guess what? Who's already doing this right now? Elon Musk and Tesla are already doing this. They have created electric cars with these bases, and the same base that could be used for a typical sedan can now be used as an SUV and things like that. So imagine you have this solid base, and then every couple years, instead of getting a new car, imagine you just get a new top, like whatever updated version, boom, right on that chassis, of that car. And whenever we're going to get electric needs, we're going to just go to the store and we're going to buy these just batteries, and they're just going to be of different sizes, and it's going to power our entire homes, right? Whether it's a car, a home, or a building. The bigger the energy demand, the bigger the battery will be. So we don't know what technology is, because again, in remote sensing, all they can do is see it, they can touch it, they can feel that it's slightly warm, but it could be considered cold nuclear fusion, or something like that, that a lot of different things are coming out. Like, what could this technology be? But one of the big action steps that I'm going to recommend you check out is this lost century. We've had technology for over 100 years to get the planet off the internal combustion engine, but people who control the oil control the power and wealth, right? And I can understand, because remember, I look at all the different perspectives. Some people say, well, if we switched all to this, free energy or much more affordable energy, it would cause havoc and wreck the economy, right? So many jobs and everything depend upon it. But if you check out this documentary, and I'm also going to include a PowerPoint presentation that Stephen Greer did that does a much more detailed about how all these technologies were out there, but selfishness, greed from different corporations and trying to prevent this technology coming out, we could have been, off the combustion engine a long time ago. So again, very, very important for you to check out. So according to the Stefan Schwartz and the remote viewing research, there's going to be more tidal energy, wind energy, solar energy. Solar panels are getting much more efficient. This is something that was so cool. Electric vehicles. That is the way you charge an electric vehicle is like the internal combustion engine. Imagine going to a facility, charging up, waiting a half an hour to an hour. That is going to be gone, right? Because it's not efficient. What is the most valuable, precious resource? It's time. So the countries are already starting to develop lanes where electric vehicles can be charged as you drive them. Just like when people have cell phones and they put them on this little pad and it charges them up. Well, you're going to be able to do that with your car. So that's something to look forward to in the future. There's going to be less traveling via airplane. People are going to travel much less, and the planes that do come out in 2050 and 2060 will be no combustion engine. There'll be some kind of electric. Like right now, we already have drones that fly. They just have to create planes that are bigger that don't use gas in order to fuel them. There are going to be a lot more trains going to be used. And so again, very interesting. High-speed rail trains. That's what Schwartz said is going to become more popular. We're already see trends. More people are going to work from home. That's already happening now, right? Right now, Apple, Google have created these different devices that you put on your head and simulation. Now, again, the problem is with this technology, sometimes it just may not be ready, right? A lot of people may be not used to it. It's very heavy. It can tire out your neck. But as technology advances, they'll get lighter and lighter and lighter. And if more people are working from home, if your employer provided you a device, so instead of going to Zoom and having virtual meetings, imagine putting on glasses and it's almost as if you were sitting at a conference room and they really looked exactly like them. Well, that would be much more interactive and much cooler than this just 2D digital image. But again, this every time we're trying to have people to start a trend, like, no, we need to get back to work, back to driving back to the city, no more work from home. Well, some companies will try, but guess what? The cat's out of the bag, right? The genie's out of the bottle. For people's quality of life, if they can save a half an hour, or 2 hours every day, not commuting, time is money. Simple as that. The higher performer you are, the less likely that you're going to want to schlep back and forth. Yeah, maybe you'll have conferences that you can all meet together once a quarter, once a month, or whatever it may be. But this is going to be the trend. So I'm sorry to people who think that, oh, I wish we could work, office in a building together. Well, there are going to be some jobs that you have to work in a building, right? So like my wife's a veterinary technician. She can't just say work from home. She needs to scan the animal in the CT scan or the MRI. You can't just do that remotely. So again, some jobs, blue collar jobs, will have to be required to go to work. Others that are white collar may not be if you don't have to. What's going to happen with all the commercial real estate, all these buildings in the city? Well, guess what? They're going to be turned into affordable housing. And if you're not using the building for housing, you could have some potential retailers. I don't know with the way Amazon is taking over, but you will use buildings to have vertical farming. There's something called aquaponics, and you can just, if energy becomes cheaper, you'll be able to have electricity and grow with special types of lights. And people already do this. We even have the lights in our house to like grow some crops, lettuces, tomatoes, whatever it may be, in these vertical farms. Okay, and it's very space efficient. What about politics and war? The good thing is there's going to be no more world war. So stop feeding into the frenzy of the media. Oh my God, World War III is coming. No, it doesn't happen. All right. There are going to be localized wars like the thing that's happening in Ukraine. But at this point, I would say that the level of consciousness in the planet is rising and rising. And, we're going to realize that we're better off together working collaboratively than constantly having war over resources, right? And especially if energy becomes cheaper and you can grow your own food. Like a lot of wars have been over resources, but if we don't need oil and we have the technology, then we have to stop fighting. And especially allowing countries to have authoritarian rulers just so that we can get their resources, we don't have to live in that world. So that's kind of good. The next thing has to do with politics. So I'm going to take a little sip of water and talk about this for a second. What they said, Stefan Schwartz said, is there's going to be continuing to be a political divide. And I think you guys have all noticed this now. And it's going to be between the blue states and the red states. And what's really going to happen, according to Schwartz in the different interviews, is he says we're in a period of decentralization, right? Where the federal government still exists in the future of the United States. U.S. is still very powerful, but power has been really gone back to the states. And you've already seen this happen with the abortion ruling that happened. Again, abortion hasn't been outlawed. It's been going back to the states so that states can decide what kind of abortion rules do you want to have? And that's going to happen with so many different things. We're just moving away from having other entities, government agencies controlling your life and having it more localized so that people can choose. Okay. And I love this kind of idea of this map because if you were to see this map, you would say only these states all agree and these states all agree. Not really. The world is really divided between rural and suburban, right? Or rural and the city, right? And so these, if you map it by county, these are really blue cities and really it's red towns. So again, I thought that that's very interesting. And again, I'm starting to see the trend, right? Where I used to live right here on Long Island, they used to be very, very democratic, and that's shifted, right? With the COVID, the masking of children, which impacted their development, with the vaccine mandates, with what's going on into schools in terms of the curriculum. Right now there's a whole backlash against woke education. Parents and teachers are fighting like, I'm the parent, and the teacher's like, no, like we know best for your children. And so we're starting to see more private schooling, more homeschooling, and that's just here on Long Island. And they're now voting for candidates more on the red side or red team because they're more about individual liberties and freedoms. So again, there are shifts that are happening in politics, and I'd like to be able to listen to both sides. I'm like, okay, you have a good point there, but be careful. And you have some good points there, but be careful, because that's what I want all of you as leaders to do as well. China is going to still be a very strong superpower in 2050. And why not, right? They're a country that's growing. Right now in the media, China is constantly demonized as the enemy and the threat. But there's a lot of people in China, and the people don't always represent the values and attitudes of the people in the government, right? China is a very big country. They have a lot of different people. A lot of people are waking up in China. They want, rights as well. But the government in China is doing something very strategically, politically. They are mimicking what the U.S. did within the last 100 years. They are basically investing in Africa and these other countries called the Belt Road Initiative. It's kind of like the new Silk Road, where they're going to lend out money to these countries, build infrastructure, and in exchange, send us resources, send us minerals, send us all these different things. So China is now building energy plants, so many of them, because they want to industrialize, and they're just thinking ahead, et cetera, et cetera. There's going to be no racism. There's going to be gender equality. Finally, after along with all this, again, I think that there's a lot more. I think there's a lot less racism. I'm not saying that racism doesn't exist and there's a lot more gender equality, but the media and politicians love to use different examples to inflame as if it's a much bigger issue, because guess what? That's what outrages people. That's what gets eyeballs. But I think we will have grown out of all that. Currency, you're going to have four ways to pay for things. Either you pay with your finger, right? Probably because of identity theft, like it's harder to cheat. Your iris, again, your eye is very individualistic. Your wrist, so maybe people will actually put implants in the wrist. I wouldn't do that. And I'm not too a big fan of using my finger or my eye. But, right now you have a smartphone. Will we continue to use a smartphone to pay things? Well, that will still use our phone because it's a device. But remember, there'll be newer versions of iPhones. And I thought this really was a cool image where it's like a translucent iPhone. So maybe that's the next, as the technology advances, it gets thinner, more translucent, and much more tech, smaller, and be able to do a lot better things. This is a sensitive thing, has to do with religion. Now, again, I have a lot of family members and friends that are devout and very religious, and they're concerned about the decline in religion. And what they see is that there's a war on religion, and I understand some of their points. Like, I was raised in public school education. Do you know how much I was indoctrinated as religion is the problem? Religion is the problem. All the different wars, think of all the past history. But what I really, after I was indoctrinated with that, like, oh, religion is bad. But as I've grown older, what is a religion? Religion is just a community. There's a people that love to worship God and they want to be a community around values. Some of the most religious people that you'll ever meet are actually really happy, nice people. It's like a bell curve. There's always going to be great people and bad people, But what's going to happen is I'm seeing the churches that are really adapting, that are being much more inclusive, are growing in size. And so religions who want to have that strict orthodoxy, well, guess what? There's going to be declining, because we're going to start to realize that it's not this one religion, this one religion. It's like we can see the good in all religions, and that's my philosophy. But again, there's going to be a lot of backlash from religions of they're going to see members decline, and guess what? Maybe Stephen Schwartz is right. You're going to have some maybe religious figures, Christian white nationalists, that might be more radical. But the question is, how much of that? How much do you want to focus on that? How big and how powerful are they? If you've ever seen like a KKK rally, it's like one or two people are showing up, but like the more you try to become autocratic and lock down on censorship, again, that's going to have more people spreading on the underground. You have to bring it to the light, to the surface. So what I always tell friends and family, it's like, oh my goodness, the country's going down. There's less people going to church. And I'm like, well, according to Pew Research that does the best kind of research around there, yes, less people are identifying themselves as Christian, like from 2007 to 2019, decline. But they don't see the other side. The other side is there's a rise in spirituality. What does that mean? It's the recognition that God exists, but they don't maybe call it God, maybe they call it the creator, right? Because it's much more inclusive, that we come from somewhere. There's a higher power out there. There's God in nature. There's God in every human life, God within me, God within you. And it's a more of a respect. So they less identify with this particular religion, but they consider themselves just religiously unaffiliated. So again, I'm more optimistic, so I don't succumb to the fear. There's going to be a lot more focus on yoga. Why? Because mental health, exercising, stretching your muscles, becoming one with your higher self, meditation, increased focused awareness. We know all the health benefits. Some of the most successful people in the world are meditators. And there's going to be eating and consuming less meat, right? So eat meaty is a fake meat that's made out of mushrooms, mycelium, right? I think it's a much healthier alternative. But there's also Beyond Meat, which is based on pea protein. Impossible is based on soybeans. I hope that these formulas improve because a lot of these have a lot of additives and stuff, and my stomach, I don't feel comfortable eating them and some of all the stuff that's trying to mimic. But if we can heal healthier, non-processed or much less processed, meat substitutes, I think better are going to be. This mono agriculture that we have of like spraying pesticide, that's going to go away. You know why? If you do one crop and you do it all over and you get one virus, one bug, one pest, it could wipe and destroy a whole crop, right? Imagine all this crop and then you have a drought and then all the crops are lost, right? Like we're going to get to an area to actually have local agriculture, local farming, which I think is better for us and the planet, you know? For the areas that are going to be so hot because of the temperatures, they're going to actually have to build domes, right, to help maintain the temperature, because that's the only way that people are going to be able to walk out comfortably. There was a show that was called Under the Dome, but that's what they will look like. Small communities, living, simplified living. So I provided a tiny house here. And then Stefan Schwartz also said that there's Scandinavian architecture. And I had to look up that, like, what will homes look like in the future? I'm like, what's Scandinavian architecture? It means it's a type of agriculture done in like Sweden, the Netherlands, and this type where they love and appreciate nature. They want simple feeling, not like big mansions. All the houses are simple, clean, a lot of windows connected to nature, locally sourced, renewable lumber, bamboo, like whatever it is that it's clean without chemicals. So I just look at this simple living, that it's not an overconsumption of stuff, right? The next is population decline. So everybody's worried about population. Oh no, it's actually the opposite. We're having a decline of population, and it will continue to do so. Why? Women are having kids much later on in life, and they're having struggles. There's a lot of contaminants in our environment, PFAS, maybe a lot of these earth changes of the planet going through, land subsidence, volcanoes, eruptions, tectonic plates rising and falling. Well, that can scare a lot of people. So a lot of people are going to less likely to have kids. There's going to be low sperm count in men, right? Especially with all the toxic chemicals. Now, all from that could be very doomsday perspective, like, oh my God, what's going to happen to our species? No, according to the spiritual perspective, we're entering a new age, a golden age, an age of oneness. And from their perspective, from all these other non-scientific sources, they're saying is only beings of high light are going to come in, right? Because it's so tough to get into this world, to be a child born in this place, that they want the best of them to come in because we're entering a good time. Health, again, a lot of people, the plant's going to be cleaned. If you're not taking care of your health, if you're obese, if you're a very anxious, fearful person, as we've noticed in the pandemic, you're likely to get sick and you're more likely to die. And there's going to be no more antibiotics, so you're going to have to rely on probably natural stuff, taking care of your health. And hospitals are going to transform. They're going to much more focus on preventative care, which I'm like, hallelujah. Right now I'm very critical of our healthcare. And guess what? Even Stefan Schwartz is very critical. He calls it the illness profit system, right? They make more money the sicker you are. And so I'm very hopeful that, again, he says that we'll eventually go to like a single payer healthcare system and things like that. So that's good. Health development of the Homo superior. So he says that it's going to start in China. There's going to be less regulation, but there's already CRISPR technology where they can manipulate the genes. So you're going to want to make sure that you remove all the defects, and we're going to have a new type of human. And Stefan Schwartz is really worried about this. Oh no, this Homo superior, this is very dangerous. I don't see it that way. human species is evolving and it will continue to evolve. And if we can have less disease, more resistance, more love, more peaceful, loving people, then I think that's a good thing. So, but again, this is what the remote viewers have said. And the last couple of things, AI does not take over. So all the media, everything, robots do not take over. So this is an image of iRobot, that movie. And, and I remember, I think it was Yomerly, you asked a question, when I asked the group, like, are robots going to take over? The answer is no. And I give you the perfect example why. I owned this little Roomba robot, right, to help vacuum the floors, right? This is the first level of robot, right? And so I bought it. I spent $600 on it, and it would like vacuum the floor, fall around, not hit the furniture. Guess what? It was a pain in the butt, right? It had a docking station that it was supposed to charge itself. It would never get into the docking station. It was loud. It was making noise going around the floor. It wouldn't get to all the different areas. So if you had one of them, you have to like move furniture for it to, and it's like, it would take you an hour of noise of this machine going up and down, up and down, up and down to clean a floor that you could do literally with a Swifty mop, put that little static wrap around it, go boop, 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 all across the whole floor. And in 4 minutes, you could be done with the whole floor that the Roomba took an hour with noise and electricity and doesn't even charge right. So you can hear a whole bunch of people complain how the Roomba, anybody wants them and stuff like that. If you have it and it works, good for you. But a robot is going to be so expensive. Imagine an entity that has to do all these different tasks when it'd be much cheaper to hire a person who has common sense to take care of these things. And I listen to a lot of different futurists. Again, people love to talk about robots of the future. They only talk about one type of intelligence, right? But there's so much more intelligence. There's emotional intelligence. Yeah, robots can do stuff faster and better. If you compare a person against a machine playing a chess, the machine will win. But if you use a person augmented with other technology, that person wins against the machine itself. So we're going to find that AI intelligence is just going to improve different things better and faster. So what they've seen, it's going to take over in medicine. Medicine is so expensive. So if you can have machines and everything doing that, then that's going to save you a lot of money. Driving is a very dangerous thing, right? But driving is good because you have to follow traffic lights, right? It's parameters, right? That's why AI is great for that, because you program and you say, in this situation, you do this, in this situation, and you just make it smarter and smarter so that it can make people safe in terms of driving. And guess what? If you have a vehicle that self-drives, that gives you more time to read, to put on makeup, to do whatever. It's quality of life. So that's naturally where AI is going to help us and make life easier. And I'm going to give you as an additional resource a video that I did of a book, Life Force by Tony Robbins. And there's a company called Fountain Life. I subscribe to it. And now there's all these different tests to help you live much better. And again, it costs, at that time when I researched, like $12,000, but now it's starting to become more affordable, around a couple $1000s. And you can actually take some of these tests home instead of having to go to the facility. But imagine, this is just ahead of the curve. Eventually, hospitals will want to adopt these technologies, but it's starting in the private sector and it'll eventually come to different hospitals. But now you have CT scans, but now there are coronary CT scans, and it's also known as Clearly is the machine, and they can do a better detection using technology and artificial intelligence to figure out what's going on, looking at your veins, plaques in your arteries, and all this other cool stuff. There's MRIs. But now there's MRIs that are full body MRIs, and a new technology called Grail, where it's like figuring out everything that's going into your body, and it's going to prevent problems before they even occur, right? So we've talked about a lot. Woo, I need to get a drink of water. That's a lot of future predictions. So what did we learn? 3 major changes: climate change and energy, or 3 massive migrations away from the coast, away from the central because of storms, flooding, and heat, We're going to have the end of the internal combustion engine, and the best places are to live are high elevation with access to abundant water, right? So the predominant places are going to be the Northeast and the Northwest. Energy, as we can tell, tide, wind, solar energy. We're going to actually have other energies that you just buy from a store, and it's going to power your whole house, a car, a building, whatever. Transportation, EV vehicles charged by the lanes, less airplane travel, high-speed rail, more remote working from home. Politics, there's no World War III, less federal government, more power to the states. China has a larger role. Racism and gender equality are no longer issues. Currency is going to be paid with a finger, a chip in the wrist, eye scan, and using advanced phones. There's going to be less orthodox religion, more spirituality, yoga and meditation, less consumption of meat, more meat substitutes, less monoagriculture, local farming, homes, small communities, Scandinavian architecture, minimalist lifestyle, hot areas are going to have to live under domes. Health, dealing with underpopulation, less sperm, less children, more pandemics. Yes, pandemics are still going to happen because people are sick, people are not eating right, and that's just, we have to deal with it. But thank goodness hospitals will eventually focus on preventative medicine. There's not going to be antibiotics, and we have to be on the lookout of the Homo superior. And don't worry, AI is not going to take over. We're just going to have advancements, especially in medicine and driving. So what are the action steps that we can take? Okay. So when it comes to climate change, you got to move to higher areas, get access to clean water, water filtration, farming, start composting. Even if you live in an apartment, start growing even seeds and sprouts, like I've talked about. Reduce your consumption, less beef to help save water and better for your cardiac health. Become more resilient, right? Be decentralized. Don't be dependent. If the grid goes down, what are you going to do? So we're going to have to become more self-reliant, which I love. And I actually did trainings on resilience that we're going to talk about. So have a generator in case things happen, right? Nutrition, take care of yourself, exercise, 1 month food supply. So you're not the person panicking going to the store or buying gallons of water because the water valve shut off, or there was too much water so to conserve, or electricity went down. You're going to have to be responsible. Some action steps: you can watch The Lost Century, watch the 2 trainings of Electus Society that we did on resilience and what's in your water. In terms of a community, well, we can lobby, we can we can promote mitigation efforts, we can promote policies that allow people to rise their homes, right? Raise them up. I'm not going to be mad at somebody who wants to live along the water and be happy, but they should do so responsibly. And to do so, they should be incentivized to do these proactive and not penalize them, right? Because everybody loves the water and loves to live on the coast. So they shouldn't be penalized to do so. So we have to create policies that make that happen. And when this does happen, and if it's likely to happen, we have to have homes to help handle this migration. We can't just wait for the last minute. We can create more affordable housing and support local farms, as much as possible, so that we're not dependent. If, oh my goodness, all the different suppliers of all of our lettuce and our grains have dried out because of drought. Well, I have my local agriculture. I do my own sprouting. I have reserves. You're not going to be having so susceptible to like bouts of inflation and things like that are still likely to happen. Okay. And this is what other countries are doing. Netherlands is creating storm surge barriers. They're thinking way ahead. They even created floating farms where like they have cows, and if the water rises, guess what? The whole farm will rise with it. And I know we didn't have enough time, but we ran out of it. But this is an additional resource video that I'm going to send that has to do with consciousness. And guess what? According to Edgar Cayce and these other researchers, they found out, when are we going to enter the age of oneness? Guess what year they said? 2038, give or take 2 years. So if you add 2 years to 2038, that is going to be 2040. So that is when we're going to, and that makes sense with all the things that I'm learning, with all this different climate change that's happening, better free energy or much more affordable energy. It's like, we're going to become more collaborative. We're going to recognize that we have to love nature, and that we can't just overconsume, and that we're going to have to love one another. And there's nothing like some crises that we're going to have to go through in order to make it happen. Okay. So at this point, I'll take any questions. Thank you so much for taking the time. I know we went a couple minutes over, but if you do fill out the Google form in the post chat, I'll also include it. I'll send a link right here. Give me 1 second. Just feel free to raise your digital hand, and I'll take any questions that you may have right now. Well, here's the post assessment for those who want to take it. Okay. So while we're waiting for the questions, I just want to give a shout out to Yomerly. Yomerly, thanks so much. You actually asked some fantastic questions and shared them prior to the training. And so here are some of the questions. I'm just going to answer them briefly. How can we help people every day, stop over consuming, right? Well, guess what? I'm not a big fan of forcing people to do, and I'm not a big fan of depriving people, but I just invite all of you to lead by example and stop consuming so much. My wife and I are part of there's face groups now called Buy Nothing, and now it's like there's different terms for it. But if you live in a local community, instead of throwing something out in the garbage, they say, "Does anybody want it?" And people will like request it, or they drop it off of their curb. And so we could have spent thousands upon thousands of dollars, but we're finding that neighbors are now sharing resources, which is resulting in less consumption. And that's especially good because of less financial issues that were coming up. How do we reduce pollution and greenhouse gases? Well, again, like I shared, I don't know whether you can. I believe in reducing pollution, but there's so much um, manipulation, individual agendas. A good idea becomes a bad idea when it's taken over by people's agendas. So, for example, Germany tried to go green and use less greenhouse gas emissions, and guess what happened? They basically stopped their nuclear reactors, they stopped their coal burning furnace, and they started relying on Russian natural gas. And the moment that Ukraine war started, guess what happened? Energy spikes of electricity costs went through the roof in Germany. They had to shut down industries, and now they're having to restart burning fossil fuels again. Otherwise, like people would freeze. So it's like, remember, you could have a good idea, but badly implemented becomes a bad idea. So there was a book written by this environmentalist that basically said the best thing that some countries that are burning wood right now for their fuel in order to help greenhouse emissions is to switch them from burning wood to burning coal. You're like, wait, what? I thought coal was the enemy. Gas emissions. It's like it's all different, right? And we could do all this saving of greenhouse emissions, but a volcano can explode and can put so much carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. We have to stop deeming carbon dioxide because carbon dioxide is something that nature and trees use to help grow. And if you go to local farms, local warehouses and greenhouses, guess what they pump in those greenhouses? Carbon dioxide, because it makes the plants grow bigger. So I'm not a fan of demonizing carbon dioxide, but I am a fan of reducing pollution and policies that are less pollution in the air, because I want people to drink clean water and breathe clean air. And the other question, how do we reduce toxic contaminants, you've asked, Yomerly? You basically said, well, it's in the chemicals, it's in our pans. So stop eating Teflon pans, buy ceramic nonstick pans. And instead of buying different detergents with a lot of chemicals, I said make your own detergent. That's what we do. Instead of cooking foods in plastics or holding it in plastics, use glass Tupperware with a plastic top. Drinking out of aluminum type or steel type cans, not just plastic, things like that. So again, there's a lot of things that we can do to help clean an environment. And then the last question Yomerly asked was this one, which was really intense. It's like, what about karma? Okay, this is all about predicting the future. We talked about reincarnation. How do we why do good things why do bad things happen to good people? Why do good things happen to bad people? Well, I'm going to have to go to what I believe. I do believe that what's happening in these trends are likely to happen, right? I do believe we also have free will and we can change our destinies, right? However, when it comes to karma and reincarnation, all I can share with you is what I've gotten from non-scientific sources, stuff that I've read from my spiritual books and from ascended masters, people like Jesus, people like Saint Germain, and others. And what they say is the soul exists outside of this body, right? We are soul coming into this human in order to have experience as creators. God gave us this gift of life to be a creator, so that means we can use our power, our body, our mind, our thoughts and feelings, and we can use it to do something constructive, or we can use it something to do destructive. And for the people who do something that's very destructive and causes harm to other people, it's because they lack the awareness and they're susceptible to their emotions and they're causing that harm. But life is set up that whatever you do and create, you have to experience back at you. So it either will, if you cause harm to other people, you will actually have to then experience that harm, either in this lifetime or the next. That is how soul, the God, we expand and we grow in terms of consciousness. Now, what I've also read from the text is we don't have to be in this karmic cycle of cause and effect of karma over and over again. Because why? Every time I do something bad, every next lifetime, I have to do something again and experiencing that over and over to learn my lesson. We would be forever in this karmic, cycle, and we would never leave, and life would be hell. But it's only through connecting to your higher self, your God consciousness, your I am presence, whatever you want to call it, and then you use that to guide all of your actions, then any harm that you've caused, you don't have to experience over again. You can call upon the law of forgiveness as long as you've learned the lesson and you then start acting out of compassion and love, you can end that cycle. And so for people in quantum physics and say this is all a simulation, your goal is to become a master of love. This is the video game of life, and you have to become a master in love. And when you become a master in love, you graduate out of this 3D world of this life of reincarnation of this cycle. And guess what? You move on to the next octave of life. What that may look like, I don't know, but that's what the ascended masters say. And again, take this as a grain of salt. That's just one perspective from different things that I've read from reading the Unveiled Mysteries by Godfrey Ray King and the subsequent series. It resonates with me, but that's just one guy's opinion based on what I've read and researched. I allow you guys to make up your own mind. So we've definitely gone a lot. Yin, you have one final question. What could be the reason the hospitals are acquired in the future? Is it because people are healthier? In your research, have you come across more alternative healing modalities being used, like Reiki? Yes, absolutely. I'm so glad that you asked that, Yin. This system, profit illness system that we have at hospitals, is not going to work. Why? Because the sicker we are, the people are going to die. They're going to pass away. We're not going to rely on antibiotics. So slowly, people are going to start to wake up, right? There's nothing more than like having a health crisis to say, hey, we got to stop doing this. We have to start taking care of ourselves, right? And it's just going to be so cost prohibitive, right? And innovation always needs to start off somewhere. But I think more and more people are starting to care about taking care of their health, right? And I think hospitals are going to be quieter, both because a lot of people are going to die and they're still going to die over the years. If you don't choose to take care of your health and like to meditate, to exercise, to eat good nutrition, you're just going to be wiped out by some other new pandemic. You're going to live in fear of some new virus. But remember, you can see my other trainings of lessons from the pandemic. That's another training that I had that talks about how to maintain health. And we have to have a different view. So, yes, I'm also a big fan of alternative healings. I'm a Reiki master myself. And now I'm doing a lot more Reiki trainings because I want more people to learn about this. Reiki healing is a universal life force energy that you can use to heal yourself and heal other people. For some people, that might be woo woo, but for a lot of other people, now is the time that people are becoming more and more awake and open. And there's also a new system of technology that I'm fascinating and researching now. It's called Energy Enhancement System, system, and it's invented by Dr. Sandra Rose Michael. And they're like different areas all around the country and now being built. Instead of going to the hospital, they're basically using light therapy, and they actually people sit in this room in relaxation, and they find that they have healing, the reduction in the size of the cancer cells, tumors. They're seeing basically their blood pHs rise. They're seeing the cells, measuring the energy of their cells in terms of millivolts increase, like cancer cells, develop in low millivolts, like around 20 millivolts, but an optimal healthy cell is 70 to 90 millivolts. And they're like doing blood work. They're seeing people have less seizures. So, and it's using scalar and biophotonic energy, or light therapy. And so again, scalar has to do with quantum mechanics and quantum physics and different lights that travel at the speed of light. It's too complicated to go into now, but I'm doing the research right now to see that. But yeah, again, hospitals are going to have to adopt that this is coming, and that this way of going to the hospital after you're already sick is not going to work. So I'm very optimistic about the future. Thanks so much, Ian. Great question, and thanks for mentioning that. All right, so everybody, woo, covered a lot, went way over, but good questions, but I think it needed to be said. So thank you guys so much. I hope you guys enjoyed this training. Please submit your feedback when I send out the recording, along with the notes, and I'll give all of the additional videos and resources to go down these rabbit holes. But remember, be optimistic, all right? Be more resilient. Now that you know of these likely changes to happen, you can plan for them, and when they do happen, you're not going to be afraid. You're going to be part of the leaders that make positive change in this world and use it for constructive purposes. Thank you guys so much. Have a great night, everybody. Bye-bye, bye-bye. Thank you so much for watching this video clip about conscious leadership. If you are committed to helping to create more conscious leaders in this world, that is, leaders with more humility, more integrity, more awareness, that take constructive action, then consider helping us by making a donation. Our goal is to have 600 conscious leaders develop before the end of this year. Currently, as of December 1st, we already have 400 members. And again, with your help, we can grow even further. How can you help us? Simply make a donation. If you visit buymeacoffee.com/Electus Society, you can either choose to give a monthly donation and join, and you get different access to a lot of these different membership benefits, or simply make a one-time donation. Click on the heart support button, choose 1, 3, 5, or type in any amount of coffees. Hit the support button, and you can upload your card information on the secure platform. Thank you so much. I appreciate you, and let's continue our mission of building more leaders. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.